Well, thank you all so much for joining us for Firefly Fun with the Mass Audubon. There is a lot of science behind the magic of fireflies. Learn how and why lightning bugs light up, about the different species of fireflies, and how these beetles can be identified by their flash patterns. These brilliant insects can also help us learn more about a wide array of environmental issues, including climate change, habitat loss, light pollution, and pollinator protection. We're also going to learn about the Firefly Watch, which is a nationwide community science project run by our very own Mass Audubon. And so this presentation is led by Tia Pinney, who's a biologist, lead naturalist, and educator at Mass Audubon's Drumlin Farm Wildlife Sanctuary in Lincoln, although she's very close to Tewksbury this afternoon. Since 1994, when she first started working at the farm, Tia has overseen efforts to maintain New England's wildlife on the 206-acre property, managing staff and volunteers in planting projects and citizen science. So again, thank the Friends of the Library for sponsoring, and Fort Rawdon, Raleigh, and Rockport for partnering with Tewksbury to help spread the word. So all 50 plus of us who are watching live and the 100 plus that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Tia for joining us this afternoon on her lunch break. And Tia, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate the enthusiastic introduction. So I'm gonna try to get through fireflies quickly enough so that we do have a good 10 minutes or so at the end for questions. You know, if there's, please record your question, because if you have a question, somebody else will have it also. So I just love this image. This was taken by one of my colleagues, actually. You know, that fireflies are just things of wonder. Sarah Lewis is a local professor. She's from Tufts. She's now retired, but she is one of the world's leading experts on fireflies. And that's how she introduces her talks, is to be susceptible to wonder, which I think is a great thing. I'm going to turn on my laser pointer and off we go. This is a beautiful shot. This is not something we see up here in New England, but this is down in the Carolinas. This just absolutely, this is a species of fireflies that can stay lit. They can maintain a light for up to a minute, as opposed to our short flashing fireflies, which is far more common. These fireflies can maintain, you know, a long, and so you get these trails all over. I would love to see that. I think that just looks so cool. But another moment of the element of why fireflies are so compelling, just because they're fascinating. We just, they're gorgeous. So today we're going to talk about what is a firefly, what makes a firefly a firefly. We're going to talk about the life cycle of fireflies, the chemistry, how they do what they do, and why they do what they do. Then we'll get into types of fireflies and mating and flashing pattern stuff. And then we'll work into where and when and how to find them. Here we are on the first day of summer. It's a perfect time to go out and look for some fireflies for the next few weeks. And then we'll talk about the threats and solutions, and we'll finish up with a slide about Firefly Watch. If you're interested in adding to a community science database, that would be totally cool, and pretty easy to do. They are fascinating little insects, and I find them very compelling once I start paying attention to them. And I think that's part of the thing for most of us, is that that we remember them as I certainly remember them in a lot when I was a kid, and I realized that I live in a different kind of environment than I did as a child. I grew up on a farm with lots of with fields and forests and good, surrounded by perfect firefly habitat. Okay. Oh, one thing I should note before we start talking, because it may be a question that people have, is firefly lightning bug. Same thing. No difference between the two. Those are just two different common names. And the interesting thing is they are neither a fly nor a bug. They are an insect. So they belong in that huge group of organisms that are all defined as insects. 3 body parts, a head, a thorax, and abdomen, 6 legs, 2 pairs of wings for the most part. Some have 1 pair of wings, some have none, but that's your basic insect. 3 body parts, 6 legs, 2 pairs of wings. So they are insects. Now, within that group of insects, they are beetles. They belong to the order of beetles, Coleoptera. And you can tell that they are beetles because of this. This is 1 pair of wings. This opened, you can see it closed here. They're called elytra or elytra, the two halves. So when a beetle goes to fly, it opens this outer cover, this sort of carapace almost kind of thing. And then the wings, the second pair of wings, are what they propel themselves with. So one of the tricks of a lot of beetles, and particularly, and it's very noticeable in fireflies, is that they open that outer shell, and then they start to fly, and their body hangs. So they fly like this with that first set of wings, that armored plate kind of cover is up here. The wings are flapping, and the abdomen is kind of dragging behind, kind of hanging low. That is as a beetle. And often when you, and not all beetles fly like that, but most beetles have that sort of abdomen drop. And that's a great way to identify a flying beetle, when it opens those wings and takes off. And then they belong to the Lampridae family, which it's the origin of the word comes from a Greek word meaning light, shining, which is got the word lamp in it. So it's where we get the word lamp, all, same origin, and it just means shining. Actually, their full background name means shining butt, which is, very literal. You can see here, this is the light organ of, it's not lit, but this is the light organ of this firefly. So they are insects, they are more specifically beetles, and they are more specifically than that, Lampridae. And on we go. Okay, so what is a firefly? Basically, there are 2,000 species of, I'm gonna close my thumbnail so I can see better. There are 2,000 species of fireflies worldwide. That's not a lot. When you consider that beetles as a whole, there's hundreds of thousands of species of beetles. But so they're a fairly small family in terms of the number of species. There are about 150 species that live in North America, and we can divide those into basically 2 sets. We'll talk about glowworms in a second. So there are flashing fireflies, the ones that we all think of when we think of fireflies, those when you go out at dusk and see them flashing around in the shrubbery or up in the trees, or in the tall grass. And then there are what are called daylight or dark fireflies or winter fireflies. They have a number of different common names, and these are fireflies where the adults do not flash. The adults they cannot bioluminesce as adults. All fireflies bioluminesce as larvae, even the ones that are dark as adults. They are bioluminescent as larvae. Remember, that's the other thing about insects I should have mentioned. I don't want to presume that everybody knows what page we're all on, but insects have a life cycle. There are 2 different life cycles, but for this group, for the beetles, the life cycle is there's an egg, there are larvae, there's a pupa, and there's an adult, right? So when we talk about larvae, we're talking about the juveniles. We're talking about things like caterpillars are larvae. And so here, all of the juveniles, no matter what species it is, all juveniles can glow. They can bioluminesce. They can make light. And so these are the 2 that we really will talk about. And this group here, the daylight or the dark fireflies over here in the middle on the left, they're pretty easy to pick out. And the reason they're called winter fireflies, there's one species in particular, or one genus called winter fireflies, because you often see them climbing up and down the bark of a tree in the winter, especially like when the maples start to produce sap and the sap starts to flow. You can look at a sugar maple tree and it's often got numerous bark, of these winter fireflies on them out there. This is actually a picture in the snow of a winter, of a Elychnia, a daylight firefly, a winter firefly. And this is a tiny little snow flea over here in the corner. Here now, people often use the term glowworm, and there are species in other parts of the world that are truly glowworms. We do not have any species in North America that are glowworms specifically, but people often use the term glowworm when they find a firefly larva that is shining, bioluminescent. So it's just another common term that you can use when you find a firefly larva, knowing that in fact there are other species around the world where there are, in fact, they're a whole different group. They don't even belong to the same family. But you can see what we do have in North America, and not here in New England, but we do have some where the adult female it maintains a very larval form. And here she is, she's glowing, but she's got her, these characteristics are much more indicative of an adult than a larva. So she is an adult female with no wings and a very larval looking form. And she's sort of she can't fly, she can glow, but there you go. But that's not a species that we have here in the North. Go down to the Carolinas and Tennessee, the Smoky Mountains is where you will find huge numbers of species, way different set of species, and far more than we have here down there. Someday go down and, right about now, probably. There is a great time to go visit the Great Smoky Mountains and look for fireflies. Now, life cycle. As I said, we've got eggs, larvae, pupa, and adults. There are a few interesting things about the life cycle of a firefly, is that they spend the vast majority of their life as a larva. They spend at least a year, and in many species, they spend 2 years as a larva. So the egg will get laid in the spring, and that larva will grow and overwinter, and then often overwinter again before it pupates and emerges as an adult firefly. This is the group that we're most familiar with in terms of these flashing adults. But this is the other group that we have here that's quite common for us, are the non-flashing adults, the daytime dark ones. They require, so few things about their life cycle. The larvae are very, they're major predators in the sort of soil ecosystem that they live in. They live just under the leaf litter, in that area of leaf litter and soil, and that sort of gray mix of, are you in the soil or are you sort of above the soil, that duff, whatever you call it. But they require moisture. They require it to be damp. They need lots of decomposition. The things that they eat are other decomposers. They are not decomposers themselves, but they eat things like snails and slugs and worms that are decomposers. And you will generally find them in areas that are pretty damp. You won't find them in water, but they will live in areas where the ground will stay quite moist. That's sort of their ideal conditions. Lots of rich organic material and moisture. Photurus is one of the genuses, one of the genera that we will talk about. And they are the only adults in our area. They are the only adult life stage where they actually eat, and they need to eat. Other life stage, it was presumed until quite recently that adult fireflies did not eat, when in fact they can be seen on plants collecting nectar. And so they can eat. It's just they don't need to, and often they don't. But it's not that they never do. When I first learned it, I was told that adult fireflies cannot eat, but that's not true. Life changes. You learn something, and then somebody else figures something else out, and you got to relearn it. but it's good for us, right? Okay. Now, this is the really interesting part to me about fireflies is the concept of what they do and how they do it. So fireflies are bioluminescent, and bioluminescence, here's a classic, this is just a basic definition of bioluminescence. It's a living organism produces and emits light. Now, that light is chemically produced. Thing about bioluminescence is that it is quite common in marine animals. In marine organisms, bioluminescence is not the amazing thing or the unusual thing it is for our fireflies. It's relatively common in both, I should have said marine organisms, because there's animals and plants in marine systems that can bioluminesce. In terrestrial systems, there's some bioluminescent fungi. There's a couple things, but not many. So fireflies are I'm going to modify unique. My mother would be upset with me, but fireflies are more unique in a terrestrial system than bioluminescent organisms in a marine system. So basically what it is that they have a special enzyme, and that enzyme interacts with a molecule. So I love the fact that these are the base name here is Lucifer in both these words. So we have luciferase enzyme, and the molecule that the luciferase is interacting with is a molecule called luciferin. And so what happens is that in the presence of oxygen, that luciferase interacts with that big protein molecule of luciferin, and it creates a reaction that emits light. That's as much science as we're going to go into at this point. There are a couple of things that they've discovered about it, the requirement for the amount of energy, the energy that is released. It is an extremely efficient production of light. It's an interesting concept. Can we figure out how to make light as efficiently as fireflies do? It would be tremendous. When we make light in a light bulb, a lot of the energy is released as heat. It's lost. That's one of the advantages of the little LED lights that we all use now, as opposed to the incandescent lights that we used to use. It's much more efficient light production. And so fireflies are extremely efficient light production, in that basically 100% of the energy released is light. And you can see over here, here's the light organ of the firefly flashing. Now, what the deal here is that fireflies, in the evolution of fireflies evolved the ability to make toxic compounds and maintain them inside their bodies, that these toxic compounds deter predators. A predator doesn't want to eat something that is toxic, whether it kills it or not, or it just, does something. Most predators, once they've tasted a toxic organism, will avoid that organism. And so that the toxic compounds were there first. So the ability to make and utilize toxic compounds that other organisms can't handle was there first evolutionarily. And then it's presumed, and the theory is got some strong support, that the bioluminescence developed as a way to warn predators. It's like monarch butterflies being orange. That warns predators that this is a toxic butterfly, because monarchs also make toxic compounds. And so that color is very noticeable, and it says, don't eat me. Fireflies probably developed bioluminescence in the same kind of concept. They don't have concepts there, but if you understand what I'm saying, that it's a warning, it's a warning. It says, don't come near me. I am toxic. And so the flashing and the use of flashing in their reproductive cycles, in their mating, evolved after that. So we have a sequential evolutionary process here, in that we've got the toxic compounds, the bioluminescence says, don't eat me. And then in fact, they're using the flashing now at this level of their evolution. They're using the flashing to find and evaluate their mates, because they do actually evaluate each other based on the flash. So here we have, okay, now here we have a couple of fireflies. The one on the left obviously is not flashing. On the right, we have two fireflies. They're not in great focus, but you can see there's one up here at the top. It's way out of focus, and there's one down here at the bottom. And you can see again that those last two, or the last two but one, sometimes depending on the species, is where the light organ is, at the end of the abdomen. So here underneath on the left in our non-lit firefly, we have, the light organ will be under here because this is the head over here. They're not attractive, they're not attractive larvae. Most beetle larvae are really not something that most of us cozy up to, but they're quite substantial. When they're good sized, and when you find one, if you're rooting around in a moist pile of leaf litter under a pine tree or something, you might find a firefly larva, and they will sometimes glow when you disturb them. Sometimes they glow all the time. Sometimes they glow in response to something, but just they don't all look exactly like this, but this is the basic premise of a firefly larva when you're out and about. Now we're going to talk about different genera is the plural of genus. So in our daylight or dark fireflies, our winter fireflies, whatever common name we want to give them, there are two predominant groups here in New England. One is the Elychnias, and the other is the Lucidota. Sometimes Lucidotas are called winter lucies or something like that. I can't remember. But you can see they both have a similar concept. They both still look like fireflies, but look at how broad they are. They are much wider than the flashing fireflies. They are much broader, and also they do not have, when we in the next slide we'll see that the flashing fireflies all have a pale edged elytra, but they still have this sort of shield pronotum here up. This is the part that covers up their thorax and their head, kind of. And I want you to notice the head, because here's the eye. I'm hoping everybody can see my laser on both of these, the Elychnia and the Lucidota. The eyes, you can see them, but they're not huge. And when we look at our flashing fireflies, we will notice a distinct difference. The Elychnias have this big lump in the middle of their pronotum, so they're pretty easy to pick out when you find them climbing up a tree in February. But again, they will fly. They will have that classic sort of butt drop flying pattern. I found one just the other day, actually, inside a building. Now, here are the three main groups that we have in New England. The most common for us is the Photinus, and I'm using the genus names because we really don't have any common names for fireflies. There are some common names out there, but there's no universally accepted common name, like eastern bluebird is a universally accepted common name for a species of bird. We just don't have that when we are talking about fireflies. So we're going to have to use some terminology that may look a little awkward to you, but there you are. So the Photinus, a bunch of species in New England, and we'll go through each of these separately. And this little dot here is the color of the flash. Okay, so Photinus on the left, Pyractomina here in the middle, and notice the flash is much more amber colored. And then Photurus on the right, much less well understood than the other two, but we have this brighter green flash on their color. And the other thing to notice about the Photurus is they kind of have big shoulders. They have like a pretty good sized hump at the top of their elytra, and they have an extra line that runs diagonally sort of down each side. And so that's one, that and size. There's a big size differential between these guys. But you can see that Photinus to Pyractomina, size different, the difference is not so obvious when you're looking at them, just looking at the bugs out in the wild. So now we're going to go through each one of these with more detail. So the Photinus is the most common genus in certainly in New England, and it has the largest number of species in New England. There's probably, I can't remember exactly how many there are. I've forgotten that part, but they are active. They are the ones most likely to be active at dusk, when, right after sunset. And they're also species that are active in full dark. In general, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about when and where to find them. I won't go into that specifically, but you can see this sort. So this is probably the same bug, because it's the same photographer. It's just spectacularly beautiful photographs. But you can see the open elytra and the functional wings flying, and an unlit light organ. And here's the lit light organ. And notice it's that sort of yellowish green light that's being emitted. Now, it's interesting to me. I don't know why the light color is different. If they're all based on luciferase enzyme and luciferin as the sort of source of the protein that they manipulate to release the light, I'm not quite sure why the color is different. That's a question that came to me the other day, and I realized I don't know the answer to that. I'm gonna have to work on that myself. So here we have also this one is not very big, 1/2 inch. Pyractomina, same thing, about 1/2 inch long. They're less common than the Photinus. They're not the ones that you will see. When you see them, the way you will know them is because of the difference in flash color. The flash color is much more of an amber. It's often described as like a fire ember kind of color. So it's not really orange, but it's decidedly not in the sort of yellow greenish scale. They have a hump in the middle of their pronotum in this head shield section, similar to the winter firefly that we saw earlier. They have a hump in there, and that's one way to tell them apart. Oh, you know what? I realized here, note, I wanted to point out the size of the eyes, and I forgot. This set of pictures is great. Look at this. Look at these. These are visual insects, right? The size of the sense organ is very representative of how important that sense organ is to the organism, right? So these guys, they need to be able to see something, and what they're seeing is each other flashing. So you can see these huge eyes. Here the eyes are the head is buried under the pronotum, the shield. So we're not seeing the eyes, but here you can see that much more sort of amberish glow of a Pyractomina instead of a Photinus. And make note of the size, because the next one, this is our Photurus, which is twice the size. These are twice as big. Of course, they're still not huge insects. They're 1 inch long, but they are twice as big as the Photinus or the Pyractomina. Not a lot known about their classification. We really don't know about their speciation and stuff like that, but they have a brighter green flash color. I have to say, I've never been able, when I'm out looking, I'm not by any means a firefly expert, and I've never been able to differentiate a flash and say, oh, that's a Photurus, because look how green it is. To me, they sort of merge into the yellow green of the Photinus, and we will talk about why that is in a few slides later. We'll get to that because it's a great story. But you can see here's the light organ lit up on this one, and you see that bright green down here at the tip. But I wouldn't depend on being able to differentiate a Photurus, especially if you're a beginner. Those of you that are out all the time and looking, you'll develop an eye for it. But if you're not, then don't feel like you're somehow deficient. Okay, so those are our 3 main genera, and here we're going to talk about how they go about the important process of making more fireflies, which is what everything is about, right? I mean, every organism is it's essentially its ultimate goal is to pass its DNA on to the next generation. And so how that DNA gets passed on is a highly evolved process of interaction between the individual organisms. So here we have mating. These are a couple of Photinus, I'm pretty sure. And so what happens, right, is that the male flashes, the female answers, If she's impressed by him, she will answer. If she's not impressed by his flashing, then she will ignore him. She might answer once and then wait for him to flash again and then decide whether or not he's worthwhile to flash again and show him where she is. She is more often to be sedentary. She will sit on a leaf and he will fly around above her. And so what you'll usually see when you're out is a few flashes coming out of the shrubbery or off a tall stem of grass, and then some other flashing, 10, 15, 20, even 30 feet up in the air. You'll see series of flashes, and those are the males up there flying about, trying to impress the females who are watching. And one of the things that they have found is that a very important part of the mating is what's referred to as the nuptial gift. And this is an image of a nuptial gift. And the nuptial gift is basically a packet. Here, you can see it's a spiral. It's a package of proteins and fats. And it's a food source. It's a really rich package of nutrition. And so when the male mates with the female, he gives her a nuptial gift. He produces the nuptial gift and gives it to her, and she is then able to use that nuptial gift to ensure the viability of her eggs, whether it feeds her, whether she puts it into the building of her eggs, whatever it is that's going on chemically. I mean, physiologically, not a critical bit for us, but that she makes use of that nuptial gift. So the nuptial gift is very important to her. And what Sarah Lewis and others have discovered is that the way the male flashes, now each species has a particular flash pattern. We'll get into that in a minute. Each species has a particular flash pattern. However, how he flashes is individualized. So he might flash for a nanosecond longer. He might flash just the micro lumens brighter. Whatever it is, he shows his ability to produce a really good nuptial gift by the way he flashes. He flashes a little bit longer and a little bit brighter. He's a better catch. Okay. And this process of mating and passing along the nuptial gift, so here's the actual mating probably, and here's probably the passing of the nuptial gift between them. They may stay like this all night. This may take the entire night. And they won't fly and flash again for the rest of the night once they've established a mating partnership. And it's all based on the flashing and her being impressed by the flashing, and that flashing representing, even though we can't tell the difference looking at it, we've got instrumentation that can tell the difference. And she, the insect, the female insect, can tell the difference with her level of sense of what the flashing is far better than ours. So she evaluates that flashing and determines whether or not he's worthwhile. And then they mate and he passes on the nuptial gift, and then hopefully everything's hunky-dory. Now, I believe the next slide is the one that's going to introduce an interesting little side story here. Yep, here we are. So here, this is one of the little dark sides of fireflies. This is a photorus. Remember how much bigger they are, right? This is a female photorus consuming a male photinus. She is actually going to suck everything out of him. She doesn't, she's not necessarily chewing him up, but he will be nothing but an empty shell by the time she's finished. The story here is totally cool. Some people refer to her as a femme fatale firefly. So when you see that term or hear that term of femme fatales, they're talking about these fireflies, the photorus. So the deal with the photorus is they have lost the ability to produce the toxic compounds that are such good defense against predators. they do not, they no longer can produce their own toxic compounds. So what they have evolved is the ability to mimic the flash of a photinus. She will sit on the leaf, and she will look up and see a flash, a male flashing, and there'll be maybe a female down somewhere near her who responds with her own flash, and she will mimic that female flash. And she convinces the male that she is a member of his own species, and here she is, and she's ready, and he comes down and he gets eaten. Rather than having a successful mating, he becomes dinner. And she then is able to eat the toxic compounds. She then is able to maintain those toxic compounds in her own body by eating them. You know, really, evolution, I tell you, is a fascinating thing, right? Who would have thought this? This is like you can't make this stuff up. It's just too good to be true. But so this is our femme, and look at the size of her compared to him. She's so big that usually it's a done deal. I mean, every once in a while, a photinus can get away with producing a compound that kind of seals up her jaws, so she can't actually eat him. But in general, she's far too big and overpowering, and they almost never get a chance to do that. I think sometimes she will even eat her own species. I'm not positive about that, but because there's a lot of stuff we don't really know about the way the photorus work. But I love this part of the story. You know, it's just a little gore and darkness. It's, you know, good for a story. Okay, we're doing pretty well here. Now, okay, so we're going to see now we're going to talk about flashing. So here we're just going to see, this is just a graphic of some flashing. You'll notice a flash. You can count a few seconds, another flash. Count a few seconds, another flash. 1, 2, 1001, 1002, 1000, you know, so maybe 2-3 seconds between these flashes. Notice the color of the flash. This is that amber pyractomina flash. So, you know, this is just an example of what you might see. A pyractomina male flying high up in the branches, trying to attract a female. Now here, we're going to see a different set of flashing. So those were single flashes occurring with a distinct gap between them. Now here, multiple flashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5. Gap of a few seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, and notice the color. This is that yellow green of a photinus. So this is a multiple flashing photinus. We will get to a graphic in a minute that we'll talk about the differences between them. But I've got one more slide here that I want you to look at, and we can even try to count, because this is an actual slide, again, from one of my colleagues, where she was able to get this image. Now, the one thing I will say, this one's going to look at how bright that is. Isn't that amazing? So this is a photinus, I think. I'm pretty sure. And then, you know, sort of when, I don't know if this is male or female, there's quite a few of them on this. This is a rhododendron. I'm not sure what's going on here. I meant to ask her when I found this slide in our image library, but I didn't. But if you focus on, I'm pointing at the screen, that's going to do you a lot of good. If you focus on this one and count the time frame between the flashes. Flash 1, 1001, 2, 1003, 1004. So maybe 4 or 5 seconds. 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. So I'm going on, you know, it's a little bit erratic. Like that one was a much shorter time frame, so I'm not quite sure what that means. That again, that's a much shorter time frame than the earlier ones. But it's just fascinating. I don't know why they're all crawling. I don't know if these are the females or the males, and why there's so many of them crawling out of all around this rhododendron, or whether they just emerged as adults and they're just practicing. But what happened when you are interested in looking at fireflies and you want to be able to identify them, is that you can go to the Firefly Watch website, and we'll talk about that at the end, and you can get a hold of this chart, which is very clear in terms of, so we had a single flash. Don't be concerned about the color. The color here has nothing to do with the color. This is the only, I think this is an unfortunate media choice because it looks like a Pyractomina flash color, but in fact, all of these are Photinus, which should be yellow-green. So the Photinus, 4 or 5 seconds, another flash, a single flash, 4 or 5 seconds. But then we have, the other one is the Photinus marginalis, which is a single flash separated by 3 seconds. So the timing is critical. And as a firefly, there would be no question in your mind about whether or not this was your species or a different species. This one, the flash and the size of the flash lasts a little longer. This flash lasts for, a fraction of a second longer than this flash. That's what is indicated by the size of the dots on this chart. And this flash means that the pyralis, it starts it and it tends to move while it's flashing in a way that almost creates this little tail of a flash. I've never seen this in person. I'd love to, but I haven't. And then remember that multiple flashing species that we saw in the graphic, that recreated graphic. So that's what that is. You'll have multiple flashes and then a gap, and then you'll have multiple flashes again. So the rhododendrons, I'm thinking probably the ignitus, maybe the marginalis, because there was an inconsistency in terms of the number of flashes. So I don't know what, you can put your thoughts on which one you think it might have been if you were counting more clearly than I was. You can put that in the chat if you think you've got a better sense of which species it was. But that's exactly what Firefly Watch is about. There, it's about using that flashing pattern to see what you can figure out about what's going on. This is just a beautiful picture. This is, I think, this is a, it's obviously a time lapse, a very long time lapse, because the stars have moved all the way through their nighttime orbit. So it must have been hours and hours long. And all of these sparks here are fireflies. This is a kid. He was it was submitted to one of our photo contests. But just, the way fireflies are referred to, the way people relate to fireflies, I love the science, but just the wonder of fireflies never ceases to get to me. It's just so joyful. I was just up in Maine the other day visiting my grandchildren, and everybody had gone to bed, and my 11-year-old granddaughter, she and I are both sort of night owls. She was already upstairs in her bed, but I went upstairs. I said, "You got to come downstairs. We got to go outside." So the two of us went outside and watched the fireflies in the yard for a while. It was, it's just beautiful. Now, where and when to look for fireflies? Okay, so fireflies live in a lot of different places. One of the things about where they tend to live the most is where you are on the edge of habitats, where you might have a wet sort of meadow and some shrubbery and some trees. That's kind of, they tend, I've not seen them a lot in deep forest. But if you've got a forest edge, if you've got a marshy area, they can't live in water, but as I said earlier, they need to have water around them. They need to have quite a bit of water. So if you've got sort of a damp, marshy kind of place, that's where you're likely to find fireflies. They need some tall grass. They need some unkempt areas. They come out at dusk and full dark. So no point in going out before sunset, because you just won't see them. But once the sun has set and you're 10, 15, 20 minutes past sunset, start looking, and then keep looking. Over the next couple hours is when they will be out and active. Even the full dark fireflies will be finished by 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. They do not flash all night. Whether they find a mate or not that night, they will stop before the middle of the night, before midnight. But so you need some open, unkempt sort of habitat, basically. When you think about it, a perfect, if you want to collect them, I know it's something that many of us did as children, and we might like to do it again, or do it with our children or our grandchildren, or if you are a child, I don't know, but whatever. You need a clear container. You need some tiny little air holes. You don't want them to be too big, because you don't want them to try to climb out an air hole you've made, especially if it's got sharp edges. So just remember that, make tiny little air holes. They do like moisture. They do need moisture. So a little piece of moist paper towel or something like that inside your container to keep it humid is great. You need if you're using a net, then a fine mesh butterfly net is the only thing that's going to hold them. You cannot have insect repellent on your hands. This is probably the most important piece of information on this whole page. If you put insect repellent on yourself, then you've got to clean your hands before you handle the fireflies, because insect repellent will kill them, or it could kill them. And so be very gentle moving your firefly, because they may have a bit of a shell to them, but they're still, they're still an invertebrate. They're a soft, mushy little animal with no skeleton. And then don't hold them too long and let them go. Clear lights, like a regular flashlight, is very distracting to them, and it also interrupts your ability to see in the dark. If you want light, then cover your flashlight with red cellophane, or use a red headlamp. They actually have headlamps that are red. That red color will allow you to see, and it is less disruptive to your nighttime animals and less disruptive to your nighttime vision. So so avoid using white light sources when you're out there looking for fireflies. If you're not actually going to try to chase them down and collect them and do things, and you're not, you set yourself in a place where they're going to show up, then just sit there with no lights at all, and wait for them to show up and give you that lovely experience of seeing them. It is fun to catch them, though. I did love that. But so that's where to find them, and what to do when you do find them, and how to deal with them when you find them. The other thing is what can you do in order to help them? How can you, as a general participant in the world, help any organism, much less a firefly, which is, look at these two yards are in the same neighborhood, I have to say. This is one of our firefly experts, who he's since retired and no longer lives in this house. But this is his house. One of these is his house, and the other is a house nearby him. So, as a firefly expert, which of these habitats, which of these yards is more conducive to providing the needs of fireflies, or of any organism in reality. And you're welcome to put it in the chat, but I'm just going to go ahead and offer up that you can see here, we've got all kinds of different height plants. We've got areas where we do have low mowed area here, but we've got lots of tall grasses. We've got some shrubs. We've got some tall trees, pine trees in particular tend to hold a lot of moisture underneath them. They're good for fireflies. And over here we have this completely sterile lawn. The areas that don't have lawn are covered in bark mulch. Bark mulch is anathema to any organism making use of the habitat. So if you're going to find fireflies, they're going to be over here on the left. They're not going to be on the right. And so if you have any piece of land that you are in control of, whether it's your own yard or whether it's a communal property in the town that you can influence how things are used, even if part of this lawn were not mowed, and or if there were some herbaceous perennials planted here in this bark mulch dot, this could be habitat. This could be useful habitat. So a little messiness. Don't rake up all the leaves. Leave the leaves embrace a variety of things growing there and living there, and fireflies will be a lot happier in your yard. That's what happens when I don't look at I don't know the next slide that's coming. So here's, I was giving you the lecture before I got to the list, but basically this is it. I'm not against lawns. People use lawns and they need lawns, but do you need every inch of lawn that you have? What if you didn't mow the lawn around the edge? If you have some trees or something around one edge of your yard, or even a fence, what if you didn't mow, a section that was 2, 3, 4 feet wide and let it grow, and only mowed it, say, later in the season, and left it tall even then when you cut it. If you don't mow it, it'll turn into shrubby stuff eventually. But what would happen if you didn't mow some section of your yard? What about if you don't blow away all the leaves? Leave the leaves under the shrubs. That's probably one of the biggest, most important things you can do in terms of creating habitat. Remember, the fireflies need that layer of decomposing leaf litter, both to maintain what they want, that moist, dark habitat, and to provide them with the organisms that they eat. So when we're talking about fireflies, a sort of a damp, leafy layer under some shrubs, ideal. The outside lights are a huge issue for any nocturnal organisms, in particular fireflies. It's very hard for them to see their own flash patterns, or to see the flash patterns they need to respond to when there are bright lights around them. And so either eliminate your outdoor lights, limit when they're on, turn them off so that they're not on in those hours immediately after dark. Work with neighbors to control the lights. There's a street light outside my house, and I would sometimes I wonder if I can break it, but I fear they would just come and fix it. And I'm not prone to, that much civil disobedience, but just like, why do I need this? I mean, there's nothing in my neighborhood that requires that street light. It's the end of a dead end street. And so just that kind of thing. Think, like the concept of what we do without even thinking about it. That of course it's better to have streetlights because it keeps people safer. Well, this is not an area that's of concern in it, and it actually is detrimental to the organisms that evolved in the dark. A lot of people don't like standing water in their yard. Totally can accept that, but just areas where water will settle and seep into the ground, and not that you'll have standing surface water, but then you'll have areas that are wet. Great space for fireflies. Okay. Oh, I'm running out of time. Firefly Watch. This is our last slide. So Firefly Watch, massaudubon.org/Firefly Watch, or /, whichever that is. It's the only slash on the keyboard. Easy to find. But so what we do is collect data. There is a protocol where you go out and you time it. You see what you find the firefly, and you time how many fireflies you see in any given time frame. I think it's 10 seconds, and you do, so many of those in 10 minutes. So there's a little bit of, a learning curve, but and then analyzing the flashing pattern. So if you're interested in doing it, I think it's a great project to do with yourself, your friends, your kids, whatever. It takes a little practice. I'm not going to deny that this is the easiest thing in the world to do, but if you're interested and you are willing to go out and work with other people, if you go out with somebody else, it's far more effective because you can help each other learn. To go out on your own and try to figure out what the flashes mean and which flashes they are, I don't encourage that aspect, because I think you're going to be frustrated. And so to figure out the language of the fireflies, 2 or 3 or 4 people out there together working on the same thing, cooperative learning is huge, much more helpful. And so, but I highly encourage you, and really, there's great data to look at on the site. There's lots of information about fireflies on the site. So massaudubon.org Firefly Watch, and even if you don't want to contribute, I recommend going to the site to get more information and links to other places with great information. So that is the end of our talk here. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and there we are. And so, Robert, I'm presuming that we might have some questions.
We do have some questions, Tia. Tia, do we have to do a hard stop in 1 minute, or I'm going to leave that to you. You're being
I'm
more than
good. I'm good.
generous.
I'm good for 10 minutes.
Okay, excellent. So Diane says, thank you for sharing. This was awesome. Lori asks, do the dark firefly larvae have any impact on the sugar maples?
No, because they're not eating the trees. They are living in and amongst the bottom of the trees. So none of these fireflies don't impact the trees. The trees are just something they use as a substrate to live on.
Lois asks, could the light color have anything to do with the diet of the area?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. I'm obviously going to have to do some research. But that's the diet of the area, or the diet of the where the species tend to live, because I know, like, there's some things like shrimp, the type of shrimp that flamingos eat influence their color and stuff. Interesting question. I don't have no idea.
Karen asks, do the fireflies continue to mate throughout their short lives?
They do. I believe they will. At least probably varies by species. And again, this is a group that we may know a fair amount about, but we don't know a lot of details in terms of that kind of specificity. But yes, one presumes that the female will mate several times. It gives her a better assortment of DNA when she's producing her eggs, and she will probably produce more than one set of eggs.
Larry asks, are fireflies endangered? I remember seeing them more often when I was a kid, but not so much nowadays.
Yeah, and I don't believe any of them are on an endangered species list, and part of that is probably because we really don't know what the change in their numbers has been. I think is seeing them less anecdotal, or is it truly substantive in terms of changes of number? Are you living in a place that's like where you lived as a kid? Are you living in a different type of habitat yourself? So I think that's probably as indicative of the change in numbers you see is when you're out and where you're out, and compared to where and what you did as a kid. As a kid on a summer evening, I grew up on a farm with a big wet meadow right in front of the house. And, we ate dinner and then we went outside and ran around till it was time to go to bed. So there were lots of fireflies.
Back when life was so much easier, right?
Isn't it the truth?
Barbara says, I have a good firefly habitat, but I also have ticks in the area. Yeah. Is going out at night with Pickardin, will that damage the fireflies?
No, because the Pickardin, what I recommend highly for tick control, and that, thank you, that's a very good point to make, is that the habitats will be similar. Ticks tend to be a little drier preference, but wear long pants, tuck your pants inside your socks, pull your socks up over the cuff of your pants, and spray your legs and your shoes with Pickardin. That to me is the most effective. You don't have to worry about them falling out of the ticks can't jump. They don't fall out of shrubs on you. 99% of them will come up your legs from the ground or off a piece of grass that's, so Pickardin up to the knees, pants inside your socks. And just no Pickardin on your hands.
What formula do fireflies use to make light?
Okay, I don't know the chemical formula because I don't know the molecular formula of the luciferin. But if that's something you can look up. That's definitely something you can look up, luciferin. And if you can't remember the spelling of that, when you get the recording tomorrow or whenever Robert sends it, you can go back to that slide and look up those words, but just look that up, and you can probably come up with the actual molecular chemistry of what's going on. I know
I
you can.
intend on sending the recording tomorrow. Nancy, I think your question in the chat was sort of answered. I know you asked that towards the beginning of the talk, so I think we're all set there. Elaine says, thank you, thank you, thank you. What a wonderful presentation, so informative. So folks, we have exhausted all comments and questions. We're gonna let Tia get back to her other job responsibility. Mariette says, thank you, very interesting. I chose Firefly to be my Girl Scout camp name back in California, but I'd never seen a firefly. But I always liked the way the word sounded. So I still go by Firefly when at camp. So there you go.
There you go.
Joanne also says thank you. So folks, yeah, let Tia know in the chat if you enjoyed today's program. Look for an email from me tomorrow, link to a feedback survey, link to the recording, information about some other virtual nature programs that might be of interest, and information about the Tewksbury's Adult Summer Reading Challenge, which can be done virtually, and you can live wherever you want to and participate. Tia, any last words before we wrap it up?
No, I just go out, go find yourself a place away from city lights and well-kept lawns, and get out there at dusk and see what you find.
All right, excellent. Everyone enjoy happy summer, happy first day of summer or second day of summer. I've lost track, but I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Tia.
Thank you, Robert.
Bye.
Bye all.